Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it is I, Jesus Christ, here to talk to you about my book, the Bible, specifically the book of Mark. We are here to talk about the book of Mark. Please disregard everything else in that statement. I am not Jesus Christ. I do not think I am Jesus Christ. Please, no blasphemy intended. Don't crucify me. Don't crucify me. What follows are my initial thoughts and reactions to this book of the Bible. I have not done any outside research regarding the more challenging or problematic passages of Christian scripture. Therefore, do not take whatever criticisms I may make in this video as my final word on the passage or verse in question. I am very likely going to be doing a Bible Revisited series addressing my different issues with the Bible, book by book, after conducting ample outside research. So now, without further ado, let's jump into the review. Today, we're going to be talking about another one of the Gospels. Now, if you don't know much about the Bible or the Gospels, basically Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all accounts of the life and times of Jesus Christ. They're from differing perspectives, different people, either who were there or who knew the story. And so there are variations and there's differences between them, but they're all clearly talking about the same guy and the same events. And so let's just dig right into Mark right now. What did I think of Mark? It's really interesting because the book of Matthew was very, there was quite a bit to digest in it. There was lots of details, lots of stuff that you didn't find in Mark. Mark was like almost the cliff-noted version of Matthew. One of the things you'll notice whenever you read the book of Mark is it moves extremely fast, extremely fast. It's like brushing over vast, portions of history. Overall, it didn't change the message or the messages of the gospel, but it was interesting to see how much shorter it was compared to Matthew, for sure. I do think overall I definitely enjoyed Matthew more because there was just more in it. So let's start with the things I really liked in Mark and the things I did not like in Mark. But let's start with the things I liked. I said that. The first thing that I really liked in Mark, as far as a Bible verse goes, is Mark 2:17. On hearing this, Jesus said to them, as it goes, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. One of the more interesting things about Jesus' life is he didn't come in a bunch of fancy robes. He didn't, wear funny hats and, act like he was above everyone else. He hung out with the people who were considered to be, evil and gross and sinners. And while he did not partake in their sin, he came to love them because they were the ones that needed the loving the most. The weak and the broken people, those are who Jesus came to save. He did not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. And I think that's a great way for a great verse, a great guiding verse in life. In that oftentimes I hear people, whether they're Christians or non-Christians, and they say, "Oh no, I don't want to hang out with those people. They're just, they're poor, or they're stupid, or maybe they did something bad a long time ago, and so they just dismiss them." And it's like what Jesus is saying here is kind of the exact opposite of that mode of being that I just mentioned. It's better for people to go into the fire than to run away from it in some instances. You don't want to actually get burned up in the fire, but if you can jump into the fire and then bring someone out alive, it's better. One of the things I love most about the character of Jesus is the humility involved in his character. One of the things you'll notice in Matthew and Mark and throughout all the Gospels, whenever Jesus does something great, he tells everyone around him to not tell anyone. Like, for instance, in Mark 3:11, Mark writes, wherever the evil spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." But Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell who he was. In other words, he wasn't, running around showing everyone, "Hey, look at me." I'm the shit. It's a very admirable characteristic to not try to boast about how great your good deeds are or how powerful you are. It's great. Humility. Also, one of the more interesting things, you know that verse or that phrase Abraham Lincoln once said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." You know where that came from? That came from the Bible. Right here in Mark, I noticed it when I can't remember if it was in Matthew, but it's definitely in Mark because it's right here in front of me. In Mark 3:24, Jesus says, "If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand." It's great, like Abe Lincoln, yeah. He read that verse too. I did something that Abraham Lincoln did. I'm a saint. One of the things that Christianity has historically always been a part of, or has always supposed to be, it was always supposed to be a part of, is serving, charity, all that sort of stuff. And there's a particular verse here in Mark 9:35 that I really think sums up a really good way to just view life, whether you're religious or non-religious. And it's a verse where Jesus said, sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "If anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last and the servant of all." In other words, gaining all the riches and everything in life is not everything. In fact, the best thing you can be is a servant and help others. And it's very difficult. I mean, look, I am not a saint, that's for sure. I have not done enough charity work, or I have not, I just haven't, I have not been primarily a servant in my life. You could say I've been a servant to myself, as we pretty much all of us can, and that's a flaw among everybody. It's definitely a flaw among me, where it's like I don't want to spend too much time doing stuff that requires a sacrifice of my own time, and I don't know. It's when you look at Jesus's life, all he did was help people, and when you look at other great people in history, their lives, the people that are truly remembered, usually they helped people. They didn't try to help themselves, if they're remembered fondly, of course. The verse, separation of church and state, was kind of an idea that Jesus proposed, which was revolutionary for the time, insane. He said, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." In other words, if you've got a government or some ruler who requires money to keep things going, yeah, pay your taxes. But also give to God what is God's. So, tithe and give and, charity and all that stuff. Profound, pretty cool. Mark 12:41 to 44. And I just want to read it for you. I find it pretty amazing. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "I tell you the truth. This poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." Amazing to me. I find that a pretty profound passage. It's, Bill Gates can throw $1 million here, $1 million there, and it's not really any sacrifice to him. Not that Bill Gates doing that is bad. That's great that he's, helps people out and whatnot, but the concept here is this poor woman who had nothing gave everything. She made a true sacrifice, a true self-sacrifice in this instance, and the fact that Jesus respected that is, pretty cool. Now, as for my flaws with the book of Mark, many of them are the same flaws I had in the book of Matthew, having to do with the same verses in Matthew that I had a problem with. So you could go watch my review of the book of Matthew, and you could hear about all the verses I had actual problems with in that book. You could see me talk about them. Obviously, the verses in Mark are different because it's the book of Mark, but they're pretty much the same exact sayings. Like, for instance, one of the problems I had in the book of Matthew was when Jesus talked about divorce, and I thought a too simplistic of a way that seems unjust at first glance. I could be wrong, but it seemed weird, and it was repeated in Mark, and there were other verses as well. But as for things in Mark that I actually found a problem with, there's just a couple. When Judas betrays Jesus, in the book of Matthew, Jesus names Judas the betrayer. He says, "You are the betrayer," something like that, in the book of Matthew. And I was kind of surprised. I'd never read that in the Bible before, or had never heard anyone talk about that. The book of Mark, he doesn't do that. Seems like an interesting detail to have changed, because the book of Matthew and the book of Mark, I mean, if the writers of the books are who we think they are, then they would both be there for that little exchange, and I'm pretty sure both of them would remember Jesus saying, "Yes, you are the betrayer." Also, another inconsistency in the book of Mark, or another problem I have, really, is Mark 16. It says here in my Bible that the earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have Mark 16, 9 through 20. That's a nice, decent chunk of verses. And I just wonder if the passage was not in the earliest manuscripts that we have, then why is it in here? I would have to look into it, but like, why is it in here? It's really strange, because that's like the very end of the book, where Jesus gives the Great Commission, Jesus ascends to heaven, he appears to the disciples, including Thomas. I mean, these are important passages that apparently weren't in there in the beginning, whenever we first found these manuscripts. So it was only in later manuscripts that these passages appeared, which makes me think, was this stuff added in? It doesn't necessarily change the story. I mean, you could theoretically say that the earliest manuscripts we had were incomplete manuscripts that just didn't have the last, page and a half. But because if 9 through 20 were not in the book from the beginning, then the story would end with, "Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid." And that's where it would end. It would end right after they find out that Jesus rose from the dead. So it's reasonable to assume that, the passage, perhaps the earliest manuscripts we have, were just incomplete. It doesn't really change anything big with the story, but it is weird, and quite possibly a problem. So overall, the book of Mark I found to be, really fascinating, really interesting. It has a couple challenges in it, but also it's chock full of so many profound things that it's, kind of insane. Anyways, have you guys read the book of Mark? If so, please comment below and tell me what you thought of it. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I want to know if you thoroughly enjoyed it, or if you hated it, if you thought it was kooky or weird, I don't know. But let me know in the comments section below. The next book we will review is the book of Luke. And yeah, man, I'll see you there.